Hi, my name is Chrissy Glover. I'm lead instructor for the E-Textiles in Wearable Technology class. In partnership with the Advanced Functional Fabrics of America Institute, this course teaches students how textiles are manufactured and applications for smart textiles and advanced functional fabrics. We also teach students how to do circuit prototyping using Arduino and how to create soft circuits on textile substrates using conductive threads. For their final projects, students ideate and create wearable creations of their desire, spanning fields from athletic applications to assistive applications or physiological monitoring or fashion pieces. So we are very excited to see what students come up with and present for the final event.
Hello. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Here we are with the E-Textiles class. My name is Chrissy. I'm one of the lead instructors along with Burfin this year. And we have Lena here who's gonna tell us about her project.
Hi, my name is Lena Lee, and today I'm presenting the Lordo Learner. Okay. So have you ever had back pain? If not, you probably will, as 80% of the population experiences back pain at some point during their life. And with us sitting all day and possibly doom scrolling for a little too long, our global posture is only becoming worse. And among these various reasons, a major cause of lower back pain comes from underlying conditions such as pelvic tilt and specifically lumbar lordosis, which is the excessive arching of the lower back. And I personally experienced lower back pain from lumbar lordosis caused by anterior pelvic tilt, which is when your pelvis is kind of tilted forward. And along with scoliosis, it's been quite a fun combo. And however, it can be pretty difficult to identify when your posture is bad because you're kind of used to staying that way. And in order to solve this problem, I created a flexible back trainer that alerts the users with mild back pain when they are arching their back too excessively. So here I have two flex sensors and a vibration motor on the side to alert the user. And I also used more elastic fabrics such as neoprene and power mesh to create a more breathable, flexible band rather than a brace. Because although we use braces really often for treating back pain, it can actually make your posture worse in the long term if you get too over-reliant on it. And I am trying to solve this problem by making more of a back trainer rather than a stiff brace so that users can fix their posture and learn a better way to maintain that posture, and hence the name Lordo Learner.
Amazing. Thank you so much and great job. So your brace here is so intricate. It's so detailed. Can you explain really quickly how you layered it and how you hid some of the technology that's not outwardly visible?
So on the side, I have in this pocket, I have a hidden microcontroller. Actually, I can try to show it. Oh, here it's on the inside, and I put it in the inside so that it doesn't make the user uncomfortable. And I also have the flex sensors here so they can detect the curvature of the back. And all the circuitry is in this pocket so that it's not visible from the outside.
Amazing. Great work, Lena. All right, we're going to move over to Vegeta now. Vegeta, tell us about your project.
Hello, I'm Vegeta, and this is my V0 prototype Seamless. So currently in the United States, about 4 million women suffer from late effects of breast cancer, which means effects such as pain and swelling and many others that they have to face even after treatment. And Seamless is a prototype that is to make life better for breast cancer survivors and make it a little bit more seamless after treatment. And so basically how it works is that it uses massage therapy, which is a treatment that can actually positively impact a lot of the symptoms that you get after breast cancer treatment. Most importantly, I'm focusing on pain and swelling. So here you have a lot of textile buttons, which you can press, and they can initiate either a pain massage technique, or they can initiate a lymphatic drainage technique, which is more for swelling. So it has these in different locations, and it's the oncological massage is like localized, and lymphatic one is kind of all across the shirt. So the demo is if I press this, you could see the vibration motor is moving. It's like smaller. And what's more, I have a monitoring like online database as well. So basically this would help primary care physicians track data over long periods of time about pain and swelling, which can help them tailor medical treatment even better. So here you would see, or you should see, an update. Yeah, so this is like it updates every time you feel pain or swelling.
Amazing, great work, Vegeta. And great work creating custom switches or custom touchpads that you've put into your textile. What are your next steps? Where do you hope to take this project?
So I want to integrate more different like types of motors into the shirt and try to better mimic these massage types, because right now these are just vibration motors and they can only do some kinds of motions, but I'm hoping to look into different types of motors.
Amazing, good luck on your future endeavors. All right, moving on to Michelle. All right, Michelle, here's the camera. Explain what you made.
Okay. Hi everyone. So my project is Wake Me, a band to keep you awake. So this project started off as a fun little thing to help combat the problem of students sleeping in class. So I'm creating a wristband that helps students stay awake, and there's two subsystems to it. So there's e-textile components to it, and there's a pulse sensor. So the e-textile components are different tactile and sensory feels that students can play with, and they're all connected to a vibration motor that will send different buzzes depending on which fidget you play with. And secondly, the pulse sensor will track the student's heart rate, and if they detect a drop in the student's heart rate, then it will also send buzzes to like wake up the student. So here are my diagrams and my circuits, and so I'll demonstrate it. Can you hold this for me?
We're gonna get a live demo here.
So these three are the three textile components. So for example, if I connect the dragon scales, there's gonna be a buzz here. Okay, yeah. Okay, sure. So if I play with the dragon scales, then there's gonna be a buzz. And if I press down on the knit button made with conductive yarn, there's gonna be a different buzz. And if I rub this loom e-textile, there's also going to be a different buzz. And here's the pulse sensor that is incorporated in here. So my bigger vision for this project is probably to improve on the pulse sensor part, as right now it's just kind of like a little fun little part that I can do a lot more with, and maybe in the future it can also be used for medical purposes to track data. Thank you.
Great work, Michelle. I love all the different textures and switches you've incorporated. For people who maybe have never made a textile before, can you quickly walk us through the process? How did you make these sensors?
Yeah, of course. So I made this on the weaving loom, which is right here. And I basically used conductive yarn to go through each weft. And for the knit button, I used the knitting machine, and I used conductive yarn to knit the button. And there's a conductive patch under, so when I press on it, it will connect the closed circuit and act as a switch. And for the dragon scales, I just made these with conductive woven fabric that will also act as a switch when you touch them together. Yeah, I really enjoyed this class.
Great work, Michelle. Thank you so much. All right, hello, Zalia. Tell us about your project.
So my project is tackling the problem of pressure ulcers. Pressure ulcers are wounds on the skin or underlying tissue that are caused by sustained pressure, which inhibits blood flow. They usually occur on bony prominences like the heel. And people who are immobile for long periods of time, especially people with spinal cord injuries who can't feel pressure below their injuries, below their injury, are very vulnerable to developing pressure ulcers. So my solution is a sock with pressure sensors on the heel and ankle, and it also has a vibration motor to stimulate blood flow. So after it senses pressure for a specified amount of time, in this case 12 seconds, but it would be longer in practice, It lights up neopixels corresponding to which sensor is being activated, and the color corresponds to how much pressure there is. So blue is medium and red is a lot. This is the left side of the ankle, that's the right side of the ankle, and then this LED is flashing along with a speaker beeping.
Amazing, great work. Can you walk us through your process of creating 3 separate textile-based sensors to detect pressure?
Yeah, so they're all made with the same method. First, I had to experiment with different things, so I tried having conductive thread sewn onto felt in different patterns, and then in between I put Velostat, which is a material that is not very conductive under normal conditions, but becomes more conductive as more pressure is applied. And then I also tried having conductive fabric electrodes with mesh in between, but that didn't work so well. So then I pivoted to having conductive fabric with the Velostat in between. And I sewed the conductive fabric onto felt pieces, and then I put the Velostat in between and just sewed the edges of the felt pieces together.
Great work. Thank you so much, Celia. Okay, we're going to move on to Julia now. Okay, Julia. Hello, good to see you. Tell us a bit about your project.
Sure. Hi, my project is called the e-textile tote. You can see it right here. And it is a tote bag that has tactile and visual simulation for self-soothing and anxiety relief. So this is to be used for teens and adults who suffer from mental health difficulties. And you can see the patches over here. So these are the tactile patches that are woven and knit over here. And they have different textures. And then there's 4 different electrical components. There's this one that is a vibration motor, and it vibrates like my heartbeat. There's these neopixels that light up like a breathing pattern. And then there's this dragon scale pattern that's a spiral, and it'll turn on a light. And here is a pressure sensor that to ground yourself you press, and the lights turn on. And yeah, so I did this kind of with the inspiration of an organization called Cuerdos. And they make these bandanas over here that have embroidery down in the bottom, and that provides tactile relief as well.
Great work. I love seeing all the different textures, all the different integration methods. What would you say was like a main challenge you faced while putting this all together?
Yeah, for a main challenge, I think that the TAs and I had to do a lot of work to kind of figure out. You can see on the microcontroller here, there's like only a certain number of pins. There's only 3 power pins, 3 ground pins, and like so many analog and digital pins. So you can actually see if you take a close look, but I had to reuse a lot of pins multiple times. So it was really tricky to make sure that none of the wires that couldn't cross wouldn't cross, and that all the pins are connected to the right thing. But, you know, with a lot of testing, we were able to make it work, so it was great.
Great job, Julia. Thank you so much, and I hope you're proud of your work. All right, Rivik and Vidya. All right, who should I hand the mic to? You can pass it back and forth.
Yes. Testing.
You won't be able to hear it.
Oh, I won't be able to hear it. Okay. So, a multitude of children suffer from some form of sensory processing disorder, and this can impair their daily function and make it extremely difficult for them to navigate everyday scenarios.
Yeah, so these children are in a variety of user groups. This includes children in the autism community, children in the anxiety or depression community, and overall, a lot of children can benefit from having a sensory experience, and it really helps to ground them, it helps to engage them, and it's proven to improve cognitive function.
To help combat the issue of sensory overload in everyday situations, we devised our solution, Tranquility, which is a portable 3x3 quilt that offers a variety of sensory stimuli that children with anxiety or depression can use to ease their symptoms.
So research shows that people in the anxiety and depressive communities actually benefit from nature-based imagery, and it's shown to reduce the symptoms of anxiety and depression. So we based our quilt theme around nature. On the four corners, we have our elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, or air and fire. And then we have just some nature-based cute patterns that are meant to provide an experience. And as you can see here, we felted them on, which is used to provide a tactile experience that our children can really feel and interact with. And now for the technology. Vidya, do you want to explain?
So the way that we constructed our quilt was for the data processing, we used the Adafruit Circuit Playground Classic microcontroller, which is embedded within the quilt. And using e-sewing, we created conductive switches using conductive fabric. Here, Ritvik can demonstrate how the fire works. So as you can see, this switch activates the LEDs associated with the fire symbol. And it may be hard to hear, but there's also a song associated with each of the patterns.
I don't know if you heard that, but yes, there is a song, and we use a variety of inputs and outputs throughout our project, overall meant to create the most interactive experience possible. Yeah, and
Great work, guys. It's so great to see how it's all come together. It's so beautiful. It's so professional looking. Can you show us the other two patches? And while you're doing that, what was a big challenge you faced while putting this all together?
You can go ahead and so for these two patches, the output is auditory. So I can put the microphone. Okay. Yeah. So about the auditory output, I composed a different song for each element based on, well, for lack of a better word, the vibe that I thought would fit with each element. And the songs were designed to be really calming and uplifting for the user. And the biggest challenge that we faced, I think, was integrating all of the electronic components in such a small space, especially because before coming into this course, we did not have extensive experience with e-sewing. And it was definitely a challenge to e-sew everything onto the central microcontroller while avoiding shorts and maintaining cleanliness.
yeah, the technological components were a challenge, and I believe that we learned a lot putting it together.
Great work. It looks so good, so sleek. I hope you're proud. Okay. Moving on, we have Nicole. Will you tell us about your project?
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole, and this is my project, Smart Soul. So the issue is that in the field of figure skating, impact-related injuries are very common for figure skaters, and there are like a limited amount of products on the market right now that is able to like solve this problem. So I wanted to design like a product for figure skaters that can monitor performance and technique to help with training, but also reducing injuries. So as you can see here, this one is my V0 prototype. I made the base of the product in Fusion. So this is my CAD model, this is the base. And there is a few like insertable pieces that can like fit into the shoe. This is where I basically hold all my components. And in terms of the actual like sensors, there is a impact sensor at the base of the heel. Oh, okay. Yeah, at the base of the heel. There is a accelerometer which will test like spins, rotations, as well as like jump. So that can sense impact. I also have my like microcontroller board, the battery, so everything else. And then there are pressure sensors at the, so your foot would go on it to see where your weight is distributed. So testing like the center of balance, center of pressure, and stuff like that. So some of the issues I encountered for this project is that there is sort of like a time constraint, so I only had like about a week to design it. So I went through a few iterations of my 3D CAD model. Took a lot of time, and then I was experiencing a lot of issue with like the hardware. So unfortunately, the code is not working right now. I only have the wirings. But yeah, these other stuff are just some of the material composition, the technical diagrams, and just how I basically came up with this project. Thank you.
Great job, Nicole. This is certainly a very creative and innovative project. Can you talk us through a bit about your inspiration, why you decided to tackle this challenge?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have a background in figure skating. Like I grew up figure skating, but since a few years back, I got into like a really bad injury skating. It was like shoe related from my like boot and skate. So on a personal note, I wanted to design something that could help not just myself, but other skaters out there who might also be experiencing issues with their shoes, as well as just generally to help with training. So yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Well, I hope this is something you and your peers can use in the future then. Great work. Okay, moving on to Lily. Hi, Lily. All right, you can say hi to the people at home and talk us through your project.
Okay, hello, could I hold this? Okay, hello, my name is Lily Swilling. This is my project, Cool Beans. It's estimated that 148 million people worldwide suffer from migraines. And I myself suffer from frequent tension headaches and migraines. And migraines are treatable, either through oral medication or injection, but these are inaccessible to many people because they can be painful, expensive, or unable to be taken by children and pregnant women. And recently, new technology has emerged, such as Cefali or Nerivio, which use electrostimulation in order to help improve pain regulation in the brain. But these technologies are very expensive, being over $1,000 annually because of these battery refills that need to be taken. Because each treatment only lasts from like 12 to 20 treatments, and then you have to replace the battery. And so as I was doing my research to find a more accessible solution, I found that kinetic oscillation, also known as vibration, and cooling can help improve pain reduction during migraine attacks. And so from both of these studies that I found, as you can see from the graphs here, I made Cool Beans. So as you can see here, would you mind holding the mic? There's two pockets. One pocket has the circuitry in here, and then they're connected to lily pad vibration motors. And then the next pocket has a cooling ice gel pack, which can be placed in the freezer, and you can place it in here, and it's kind of squishy too. And so, yeah, very squishy. Yeah, and so all in all, this is supposed to be in a very seamless design and to be very accessible for people. The prototype cost me a little under $80, and I think with production, this could be made lower.
Amazing, great work. This is so sleek, so like professional looking. You're a very good sewer, clearly. Talk us through maybe your future vision. What do you really hope this can grow into?
I think I want this to be able to be worn as a student in school and maybe make it look less bulky. I could just wear it to class when I'm having a migraine or a headache. So I think I might look into thinner gel ice packs or even a thin Peltier cooling system.
Amazing, great work. Thank you, Lily. All right. Moving on to Rohan. Why don't you stand next to the child? There you go. I'll stand here. All right, talk us through your project.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rohan. I'm from Bentwood High School in Missouri. And actually, before we begin, let me start off with a little question. So have you ever been in like a sort of traffic incident where you're driving and suddenly some random person just cuts across you and you're forced to step on the brakes really hard and you feel that whiplash and you're really mad? Chances are you likely have. And this can be a problem, especially when you scale this up to like F1 drivers, when they're driving like 180 miles per hour and then they have to make a sharp turn or brake, and like their body goes into a lot of convulsions. And even fighter pilots, for that matter, even though they're not using wheels, if they're doing sharp turns in the air at 500 miles per hour or at Mach 2, this thing can be really bad for their neck health. So to remedy this, I created CENTER. It stands for Critical Neck Trauma Relief. So what is my device? So I've geared it up to my little friend here, Tim, and basically how it works is here. I'll turn them around, but basically behind here you can see that they're actually below this fabric. There's actually a flex sensor which detects subtle changes in angle and vibration movements in your neck. So that sends a signal based on different thresholds. Based on the output it gives, it will send a message to the brain, which is centered a little bit below here, to alert it that basically the user has experienced some sort of neck trauma, or is most likely have experienced some sort of neck trauma. So, and if that's the case, basically it will send, there's some vibration motors here and here about symmetrical to the spine, and those will buzz slightly to not only provide a slight relief to the muscles, but in addition also subtly alert the user that they may have experienced neck trauma. Furthermore, to help remedy and relax the muscles in the back, there is a heating pad here which will help relax muscles and deliver heating relief immediately within 30 seconds. So.
Great work, Rohan. It's great to see this on Tim here and see all the integration. What was like a main challenge for you while putting this all together?
That's an excellent question, Ms. Glover. And one big challenge I had with this was carefully wiring, especially the flex sensor, into the back of this fabric without damaging it. A lot of the fittings I have here are very, very tight, and this is under a lot of stress with a lot of movements and like tension being taut. So I did actually, unfortunately, did break my first flex sensor while making this prototype. So I had to figure out ways to very carefully and meticulously input it there and make sure it would continuously work even under stress and stretches.
Amazing. Great work on your project, and thank you. All right, we'll move on to Colleen. Colleen, you're up. And while we're getting ready here, I'll remind the viewers at home that our students had approximately 1 week to actually put their projects together. So not a lot of time, so very impressive what they made. All right, Colleen, why don't you walk us through your project?
Hi everyone, my name is Colleen, and as technology advances, although we can see as very helpful, this also leads to a lot of younger children being exposed to screens, and this can lead to excessive screen time, which causes eye irritation as well as nearsightedness. And so for parents to combat this issue, they first need to know how much screen time they've actually had. And a lot of like current stuff don't have this. Like apps, they don't track across all different types of devices. So what is a way that we can? And so I designed this headband here, which can detect the blue light emitted from screens. As you can see, outside is a very comfortable fabric that will fit comfortably on the head. And it's really good because it can detect the blue light from all different types of screens.
Amazing, great work. This is so cute, so adorable. I hope kids all across the country get to wear your headband. And I'll also just share with the viewers that Colleen made crochet things for the class, custom sewn things. You're clearly very talented with crafts. What's your future vision, or what are maybe some next steps you have planned for this project?
So one of my future visions is to make it wireless. So if you can see down here, it is actually plugged to my computer for now. So my future vision is to maybe make it Bluetooth so that the data, which is the time that they've spent on the screens, can just go directly to the parents.
Great. I think a lot of parents would really love to have this. So great concept, great execution. Great job. All right, we're going to move on to Nalini now. All right, Nalini, talk us through what you made.
Okay, so I did research into triboelectric nanogenerators and integrating them into textiles. And so what triboelectric nanogenerators are is you have two materials with a difference in work function. So while the tribopositive layer wants to transfer electrons to the tribonegative material. And the purpose of this is to basically come to that host of self-powering wearable technologies by using kinetic energy from movement. And so I especially wanted to integrate this into things that are functional things that exist, that something like a bag strap. And so, for instance, I've got this one bag strap, one with knitted silver and knitted wool. And so when you put like a load, for instance, you want to hold this for a second? You put a load in here and you're walking, you're gonna have bouncing. And as you can see here, you then have this AC voltage generated from that bouncing. And so future things I'd want to do is integrate something like a supercapacitor so that I'm not just generating electricity, but I'm storing it, so for use. And yeah, that's the next project.
Amazing. Well, as you know, and maybe viewers at home know too, power is such a challenge in the field of e-textiles. We don't want to wear bulky batteries, so I think this is very innovative research. What are some key things you learned while putting this all together?
Well, I realized that you need a lot more movement and like sliding than I thought. So for instance, I made this double weave and I originally thinking of it would just be this and just the sliding just from walking, but thing is, without having this knitted silver in between to make sure there was actually movement, I was not going to actually generate something detectable because it's just in the millivolts, so it just would not be enough. So yeah, that's a lot of making sure that even while I'm researching, I'm putting them in the right places and sew that in the right materials so that you actually have that sliding, forced contact, so you have that contact electrification.
Great work, and it's great to see all your research here and an actual functional proof of concept prototype. Amazing. All right, moving on. Amishi. Okay, Amishi, tell us about Izima. Is that how you pronounce it? Izima.
Yeah. Okay, hello, my name's Amishi, and this is my product, eczema. So in the United States, about 30 million children and adults suffer with eczema, a condition for which a common symptom is itching. So for many people, these itching flare-ups are augmented due to environmental allergens and irritants. Environmental allergens and irritants such as fragrances, detergent, or environmental conditions. And so for many people, they experience these flare-ups often. And with that comes another condition known as habitual scratching, where people are itching without even realizing that they're doing so. Now this can be harmful because it can cause extreme pain and discomfort for the user, but it also can lead to infection in extreme cases. So what I made is a glove that sort of helps users break the cycle of habitual scratching and also can alert them to reapply medication if they need to. So basically how it works is that there's a pressure sensor on the index finger. On the back of the glove, there's a lining, so you can't really see, but I'll try. So there's an accelerometer, and it measures it measures motion in two directions, X and Y. And so basically I chose to do two inputs to minimize false positives. So when there's pressure being applied from finger to skin, and there's rapid back and forth motion indicative of itching, then the output, which is this vibration motor, is triggered, and this serves as the alert to user. Now to make this, I used a 100% organic cotton glove, which is already on the market for people with eczema for ointment absorption and itch prevention. And since this is a product that many eczema users are familiar with, I chose to modify this. And so the way it's on my glove is that the components have been soldered together, and I sewed them using a zigzag stitch to connect them to my glove.
Amazing, this is great work. It looks so nice and clean, the way you've hidden all of the electronics. What's your future vision? Where do you want to take this project?
So my future vision is to sort of have this be like an all-in-one data collection and monitoring. So there's a microcontroller that can connect to Wi-Fi, and so I wish to use that to sort of build an app where you can track your flare-ups and then use it like an AI model to distinguish what could be possible allergens, because not everyone has the resources to go and get an allergy test done, as they can be very expensive. And so that's what I wish to do. And I also wish to have something that can also help with ointment release for user convenience. And I also see this being used for other applications, such as for dermatologists, so that they can send their patients home for data collection, and for other conditions which can be habitual, such as dermatillomania, where people pick at their hair or skin without even realizing it.
Amazing, great work. This seems like it would be very useful for a lot of people. Great job.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on. All right, we have a traffic jam here. All right, our next project comes from Akari. Akari, tell us what you made.
Hi. So, this is memories, and so the problem that this is addressing is Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is a heartbreaking and irreversible disease that affects 55 million people globally, and there is currently no cure for this disease. But there is promising evidence that shows that 40 hertz frequency can reduce the symptoms of Alzheimer's by stimulating the cognitive and memory processes of the brain. And so I made a headband that integrates this treatment where it has 2 speakers that play at 40 hertz and a vibration motor that vibrates at 40 hertz. That way users can wear this and receive the treatment while easily going about their day. And one thing that was very important with this design was finding a balance between being strong enough for the user to sense, but not too overpowering where it causes discomfort. And the user that this would most benefit would be people in the earlier stages of Alzheimer's or people who think that they're at risk of developing Alzheimer's, because this treatment isn't able to eliminate this disease, but it does slow down its progression. So it's most beneficial if it can stop Alzheimer's before it reaches its most detrimental stages. So to keep your precious memories, you can use Memories.
Amazing. I love the name. I love your tagline. Also, great job with the integration here. Is this where the button is? Amazing. So everything is like all nice and concealed. It's wonderful. And you actually reached out to a researcher here on campus who's like really pioneering a lot of these studies into the 40 hertz frequency. Can you quickly walk us through your conversation, what that process was like?
Yeah. So most of the research on this was done here at MIT, and their lab was actually across the street from our classroom. So I reached out to the main researcher, and she was able to connect me to one of the lab members, and it was really cool to be able to ask him all my questions, and he was really helpful in making my design. And the 2 main takeaways that I got from speaking with him was that the user needs to be able to sense it, but the user experience also has to be taken into account. And it was really cool to be able to get this connection, to have this opportunity to speak with someone with so much knowledge on a topic that I'm really interested in.
Amazing. Well, good job taking the initiative to reach out to the researchers, and amazing work here. I hope this could become a product to be helpful for a lot of people. All right, we will move on to Noah, and we have another little traffic jam here. William, can you maybe scoot over? Are Annie and Kavya good? Do you want to? You're good. All right. Hello, Noah. I'm so excited to see your project. Tell everyone at home about your project.
So I made a heated compression sleeve for a knee for teachers who have musculoskeletal disorders in like the knee area. But there isn't a lot of current technology for like wearables that help with long-term and long usage of these kinds in this area. So I made a double layer compression sleeve. And inside I put waterproof pouches, which holds all the electrical parts to prevent it from getting water damage from like sweat and water spillage. So, and in addition, I added a conductive Velcro. So when the user puts it on, it automatically turns on the heater. And that's about it.
Amazing, great work. The integration looks so nice, so sleek. Can you talk us through a little bit about the inspiration behind making this product?
Actually, my mom is a preschool teacher and she experiences this kind of pain. So I thought maybe I could do something to help that.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure she will love to see your prototype once you can bring it home, and hopefully she'll actually be able to use it. Great work. Okay, we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll be back with the final presentations. We have about 5 projects left, and I do want to make a plug. Our class does have a Slido link, so if any viewers at home have a question, I can ask your question live to our students. All right, we're here with William. William, tell us about your project.
Hi, so I came up with a project called the TEG, the Expressive Glove, and basically 1 in 31 children in the entire world are diagnosed with a condition called ASD, and essentially the problems they face deal with communication and the expression of self. So I came up with the TEG, the Expressive Glove, and I pair gestures with correlating colors. So I have an OK sign, which has green signals, and then wait, could you hold this for a second? I have a heart sign. Oh wait, hold up. It's kind of like that. It's kind of hard to do in this motion, but I have a heart sign. It's pink, and the goal is to provide immediate feedback. And it's also kind of like a fun and interactive way to express yourself confidently, since this is kind of meant for children. Yeah, that's my pitch.
Amazing, this is so good. It's great to see the lights light up in accordance with the gestures. What were some challenges that you experienced while putting this together?
So I think some challenges I faced were calibrating all my components, trying to figure out the serial monitor, and the various like alligator clip like configurations. I shorted it once, and my circuit playground was smoking at a point, so I had to figure that out. But I got through it. It all worked out at the end, and now it works. So that's great.
It works with no smoking components, which is always the goal. Great job. All right, next up, OncoSense. All right, Eric and Ion. Do you want to share the mic, go back and forth?
Yeah, I can go first. Okay, our project is called the OncoSense. Onco meaning cancer, sense meaning sense. And basically the problem here is that we want to solve for skin cancer and make it more accessible to everyone. So around 5 million people are diagnosed with skin cancer every year, and 1 in 5 Americans by the age of 70 are bound to eventually get skin cancer. But the hope at the end of the tunnel is actually the fact that when skin cancer is detected early, or at least in the remission stage, there's a 95% survival rate. So the research backing that we have here is that we are using the concept of nonlinear optics. So when you shine light that is extremely bright onto the skin or on any medium or object, the way it would interact is very different to how it would interact if you don't have very intense lasers. So right here you can see that in nonlinear cases, the optical response can be like creating a new color. And so our idea is to shine a light really intense onto the skin so that would reflect back onto, say, like a spectrometer or something that would read infrared light, and it would tell the difference between a carcinogenic cell or a normal cell. Eric, do you want to talk about the prototype?
This is our prototype right here, and as you can see, this is an LED light. It shines infrared light, specifically 850 nanometers onto your skin, and this is our spectrometer or else light sensor, and it basically picks up the reflected light. And how this works is based on how moisturized your skin is or how dehydrated it is, the intensity of the light that shines back will be very different. So that's what tells us the Arduino will pick up the intensity of the light, and that's what will tell us whether your skin is dry, Vaseline-like, or very moisturized. And we're actually scaling our project back a little to detect whether your skin is dry or moisturized first, but in the future, we're trying to work on this later, so it pierces through more layers of the skin, so it actually detects carcinogenic cells. So you can do a demo.
I actually do a demo, So how we had to scale our project back, I can talk more about that. The reason why we had to scale our project back is because the light is not intense enough or it would burn the skin. So for right now, our future project is to solve for like eczema or skin or carcinogenic cells in the skin. But right now we're just looking for skin hydration. So if I were to put my hand over this, if I were to put my hand over the sensor like this, it would read it as healthy because moisturizer reflects back more of the IR light. But if I were to put like a dry skin like this right over, it would detect it as like normal dry skin or like healthy a little bit. So how we just did that is we just like differentiated between what kind of threshold detects like really good reflecting light or dry skin that detects like little to no light.
All right, great job. It's great to see a live demo too. Can you quickly talk us through your inspiration, why you came up with this concept in the first place?
Yeah, of course. So I actually have a research lab back at the University of North Texas. So I'm from Texas. And so they specialize in applied physics and nonlinear optics. And so I had a couple calls with them on what we can apply optics to biomedical settings. And so most of them were really pleased to hear me making a project about this, and they had a couple meetings with me to talk about the setbacks and what the research backing of this could be. So I'll be talking a lot more with them when we get back home and work on this project. Thank you.
Awesome work, guys. Thanks so much. All righty, Kevin, tell us about your project.
So this is my project. It's basically like a scarf. All of these individual strands are fiber optic cable, and I kind of just wanted to experiment with fiber optic cable because I know they're heavily used in data transfer, especially on Wall Street with high frequency trading, and I'm extremely interested in that. So as you can see, the light is shining through these neopixels that go through the fiber optic cable, and they travel through. It's a pretty bright room, so you can't really see it that well, but at the very tips you can see. Yeah, and the initial problem that I had that I wanted to solve was lots of people outdoors. They often get lost, especially in the desert, and it's really tedious to get people to go out and search for them. And I made a scarf that has fiber optic cable running through it that I felt would help with the project or the problem because out in the desert, lots of people wear scarves to cover their face, and the scarf's also made from a cooling cotton yarn, and yeah, so the user is basically people who often go out in the desert and they want to be visible and seen, which brings sort of a sense of safety. And the big vision is that it would become a really big wearable safety scarf that would integrate fiber optics that have side glow capabilities. These were all end glow, which means light only goes through one end and out the other. But I sanded it down to make it pretty visible throughout the entire scarf. And it was just a proof of concept, and I just wanted to play around with fiber optics, so yeah.
Awesome, great job. And I really want to make sure the viewers understand that you custom wove this entire scarf and integrated the fiber optic cables on the loom. So can you quickly talk us through a bit of that process? What was the weaving like?
So the weaving was pretty long and tedious. There's some photos here. They're pretty small, but I had to weave this entire thing. It took about 2 days. And in the beginning, I was initially just testing how far apart I could weave the fiber optic. And initially, sometimes it broke because I weaved it way too interknit. But over time, I figured out 8 lines would be good enough as a buffer, so it wouldn't break. And yeah.
Okay, well, it looks great. It's great to see the lights on and to see the nighttime picture. So great job. Thank you so much. All right, Lucas Theo. All righty. Tell the viewers at home about your project.
So here we're really looking at e-textiles, future of fabrics. We're looking at the integration of electronics into fabrics. So for my project, I was looking more into sports, more into biomechanics, how the body moved. And with that, we wanted to make a simple system where we can map the body through embedded sensors into the sleeve. So first here we have a look at all these IMUs, and Lucas can explain some more.
All right, so the IMUs, what they do is they get the positional and rotational data. And what we did was we mapped each IMU to a subsequent joint on a model in Unity, which is a game engine. And so whenever Theo moves his hand, the model moves as well.
So we're gonna see if when I flick the elbow up, elbow goes up, arms out, arms up, back down. And here we really be able to see the body move. So we're really looking at the biomechanics. In the future iterations, we want to see really what's the most efficient transfer of energy with the body. We can use this movement like this for tennis, for basketball. Just see how the body moves. What's the most and compare it to people with better transfer of energy and see what's the best way for your body to move.
All right, great job, both of you. It's so great to see the actual visualization, see it mapping with your movement in real time. This is so impressive. So you have a lot going on here between the software, the soft hardware, and all the integration. What were some of the major challenges you faced when putting this all together?
All right, so one of the biggest challenges was the subsequent software for each IMU. The software from the manufacturer only supports one IMU at a time, which is such a big problem because we have multiple IMUs. So what we did, oh, okay. Wait, should we start? All right. Okay, so what we did was we rewrote the library to make it support multiple IMUs, and once we got it working, it was like such a huge relief.
Yeah, and then another thing, we can see the calibration. For example, right now, we need to have better connection to the IMUs because even right now, the wrist is a little bit off. So that's something that we really need to look at, especially with the IMUs, and then especially looking into the code where we can center all these IMUs into the body and have a reference point for it. So calibration is a big part of the IMU and motion tracking process.
Okay, amazing work. So great to see this all come together. Thank you so much for sharing your project with us. All right, Lucy, last but not least. All right, tell us about your project.
Hello. Hi, my name is Lucy, and I'd like to introduce you to my Aqua Safeguard project. And basically, this is a smart rash guard detecting system, and it's for anti-drowning. So the problem is, every year, around 1,000 children in the U.S. die from drowning, making it the second leading cause of death in ages 5 to 14. Surprisingly, 80% of these drownings happen in residential locations because parents aren't watching. So I created a rash guard. That's really convenient for kids so that they won't forget when they're going to the pool. And then how the rash guard works is basically it has it has a heart rate monitor and also a pulse oximeter. So whenever your blood oxygen or your heart rate goes below a certain level, it'll alert, using the lights. And then there's also a Wi-Fi component where the parents are able to connect to the same Wi-Fi as the rash guard. And then the rash guard will tell it whenever the child is drowning. And there's also audio alerts. And then for the last part, there's an emergency button that if the child is feeling unsafe, they can also press in cases of emergencies. Yeah.
Amazing, so great. I love to see like the customization you have here. And you took on a lot with all of the incorporated elements and then trying to make them all waterproof too, which is certainly not an easy feat. So from all of this, what do you think was like the main takeaway you had while putting this all together?
Main takeaway? A learning outcome? I think this entire project was pretty much like a learning experience because so many things went wrong. Like even right now, the Wi-Fi is not really working. So every time I have to fix the code, and then I also have to make sure like all the connections are stable. So I learned how to solder in this class, and I learned how to ESO and everything. So honestly, this entire program and this entire project was such a big learning experience. And because of this project, I have a bunch of other projects that I now want to pursue. So I'm really thankful.
Okay, amazing, great work. And also a great way to close this out. So hopefully you make more projects and all the other students continue using these skills in the future. All right, that's it for our class. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Hello, this is the Embedded Security and Hardware Hacking course at BWSI. We leverage deep relationships with security engineers in industry and a project-centered curriculum to introduce students to the unique challenges of securing the world of embedded systems. From facing software-based exploits to physical hardware-based attacks, students will learn how to defend the critical computing systems of tomorrow from future threats. Our students compete to design a secure embedded system using the lessons they learned throughout the course about embedded software engineering, cryptography, side channel analysis, fault injection, and more. Then, they put their designs to the test by penetration testing other teams in order to capture flags. The teams with the most secure designs or the most creative attacks will prevail. Happy hacking!
The design challenge, team not Ted Clifford, Ted being one of the instructors this year.
Okay, we're team not Ted Clifford, and I'm Advika.
I'm Selena.
I'm Pranav.
And I'm Jude.
And so basically, can you what our project was a 2-week phase where the first week we had to design a secure channel that would allow us to load new firmwares onto a microcontroller or a TIVA board, which is that red thing in Pranav's hand. And our second phase was to go around and try to exploit vulnerabilities from other teams. So yeah.
This is a pretty early version of our project design, actually. This is one of the phases of designing it. We just mapped out the program. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about how it actually works later.
So we used 2 cryptographic algorithms. The first one we used is AES-GCM. It is used for encrypting and decrypting signature. The reason we chose it is because it also, as opposed to other AES algorithms, it generates a tag which can be used to verify integrity. And the second algorithm we used was ED25519, which is used to generate and verify signatures. And we chose this because it generates a much smaller key with the same security level.
Yeah, so here's a more in-depth look at what we've actually coded to make it more secure. So first we run BL build, which is short for bootloader build. And what that does is generates keys for both of our encryption techniques, AES-GCM and ED25519. It generates those keys and creates a build secrets file that is then deleted to ensure that none of our secrets and none of our keys get out for public use. And after that runs, we run a Python file called firmware protect, which takes our plain text encrypted data and then turns it into an encrypted version using the keys generated from BL build and the techniques that Selena talked about in the slide before mine. And after that runs, we update it and send it through using firmware update.py. We send it to the TIVA, and then after that, there's a bootloader.c file that runs on the TIVA that ensures that signature is from us and decrypts the data, and then we can run the firmware on the microcontroller.
So the actual data protocol is how we get the data from the firmware update script to the bootloader. And there's a lot of protections in here to prevent the data from being modified in transit. So what we do is we split the entire data blob into packets. And those packets get sent in 2 chunks each. There's a metadata chunk, which has the length of the packet and some protections to prevent it from being modified in transit. And then after that gets okayed by the bootloader, then it sends the data, which actually contains the firmware and whatnot. We use an algorithm called CRC16, which generates a small little bunch of numbers to verify that the data is what it should be. And the bootloader, once it receives those and verifies it all, it loads it into temporary storage so that it can be decrypted later and you can still receive other things. Now, there's a whole lot of things in the actual data blob that are to prevent outside attackers from modifying the data, and Selena will talk about that now.
So basically our firmware blob it consists of our signature, nonce, tag, and our encrypted chunks. And basically it's like sent in chunks because it's like too large to send in one.
All right, so after we finished our design phase, that's when we started the attack phase, which is my personal favorite part of this project. So each team has 5 types of flags, which you can steal based on different sort of types of vulnerabilities in their systems. And these are sort of the totals for each type we got. And actually, we also got one more award, which was worth 50 points, which was for First Blood, meaning we were the first team to capture a flag from any of the other teams. And so perhaps our most successful attack was based on a concept called nonce reuse. So a nonce is a number that's randomly generated, kind of arbitrary, that is used to sort of strengthen encryption because it makes it random each time. And the algorithm that other teams used has a tag from AES-GCM, which is based on 2 values, one from the secret key and one from the nonce. So if you use the nonce like it's meant to be used, random each time, then it strengthens the encryption very significantly. However, if you reuse the nonce, like 2 teams ended up doing, then that actually completely breaks the security of the system because it's based on polynomials. So if you have one unknown from the key and one unknown from the nonce, and you have 2 different ciphertexts which are based on those variables, it's just like solving a system of equations, and you can recover both values, and then that lets you encrypt any data you want and make it look like it came from them. And so that ended up getting us 6 flags total, which is 9,000 of our total points.
In conclusion, here is a larger SWOT analysis of our entire project. So first, our strengths. We were able to only have 1 of our flags captured, so 4 of them are still safe and secure. No one's been able to capture them. And so I would say that's one of our strengths. And our weaknesses in our code so right now are 2 more recent things we've learned called side channels and fault injections. Both of those are more hardware-based approaches to hacking into something, so that's more looking at timing of when things are running and overpowering the TIVA, things like that. And for opportunities when we were attacking other teams, we took advantage of things like nonce reuse and also incorrect implementation of different security features that other teams had chosen. And finally, our threats were other teams being really good and being able to hack us. So yeah.
So this is an overview of what we learned throughout the entire course. So this includes side channel attacks and fault injection, as she mentioned in the previous slide, and we hope to apply that in the future. Thank you.
All right, great work. So your team was awarded points for First Blood, or the first flag. How did you work so quickly to capture that? Did you work together? Did you brainstorm ideas? What was the approach?
Pranav noticed a vulnerability in one of the systems very quickly. It was that nonce reuse thing, and I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we noticed a vulnerability pretty early on. It was, I don't know how to describe it. We kind of got lucky in a way. We saw it pretty early on, and then we were able to work together to put together a solution pretty quickly, and that ended up getting us that very first flag. And it was a really nice feeling when we were able to brag to everyone else in the room, hey, look at the scoreboard, and then they saw that we were in first. So that was a really nice feeling, and I'm kind of proud of how our team was able to work together to do that.
All right, great work. Thank you. So our next team over here is Team Link, and they're going to present their design for the design challenge.
All right, hello. We're Team Link from the MSAT course. I'm Jerry.
I'm On.
I'm Shalok.
I'm Ming Ming.
And I'm Riley.
All right, so that's basically what our team name means, a picture.
So what we wanted to do in this project, as we're making, a vehicle bootloader, we wanted to first of all, we had defense and offense parts. So our defense was making our own bootloader, and our offense was attacking other people's and trying to exploit vulnerabilities in their systems. So for defense, we just wanted to make sure correct firmware was uploaded to the bootloader. We wanted to encrypt our firmware to make sure that other teams couldn't directly read it and figure out, get more hints on how it worked. And we wanted to prevent bad actors, which in this scenario are our other teams that are trying to hack us. To attack, we wanted to exploit the TIVA itself. So does anybody have a TIVA that we could show them? Yeah. So we did everything on this little box, which basically runs all of the firmware, all of the bootloader stuff. So we wanted to make sure that other people could not interfere with how our hardware functioned, and we also wanted to interfere with other people's hardware. And we also wanted to punish how other people misuse encryption algorithms. Because in many cases, an encryption algorithm only works if you have certain guarantees that you give to the encryption. So some teams violated that, and as a result, including us, we accidentally violated some of those guarantees. And as a result, those teams' keys were endangered. So this is basically our structure for encryption and decryption. So initially we have our build file, and this build file uses the current timestamp down to the nanosecond to generate a top secret key that nobody has access to. This key goes into both our bootloader and our protect file. So our protect file, it takes in a firmware file, a completely raw firmware file that's human readable and can be easily run on any machine. It takes that firmware file along with the build output, and it uses a encryption algorithm called AES-GCM to encrypt the firmware, so that other people will not be able to look at it. It'll encrypt the firmware, and when you encrypt firmware, it basically looks like a bunch of gibberish until you are able to decrypt it. So we separated the firmware into kilobyte long chunks and encrypted those. We also attached a authentication tag. An authentication tag is basically you use a secret key to say this piece of encrypted data is verified by that key. So if an attacker wants to attack us, but they don't have the key, they won't be able to verify. They won't be able to add an authentication tag that's valid. So we did that for each kilobyte. And at the very top, as a header, we attached stuff like the version, the firmware size, the message size, the release message, and the amount of packets. And so after we protect, we get into the protected firmware. And whenever we have protected firmware, we can upload that directly to the bootloader. The bootloader starts by verifying if the firmware is authentic. So if you have a tag that's malformed or it's the wrong tag, then the bootloader will verify that it's wrong, because the bootloader has the private key written to it the moment that we write it to the TIVA. So it'll use that key. If it does get verified, great, we move on to the next step. Next step is decryption. It uses the key, and it basically runs AES-GCM in reverse. And when it does that, we'll get some plain firmware, and we'll also get a checksum, which is this stuff. So we encrypt our firmware, taking into account stuff like the version and the firmware size, because those, if somebody lies about them when uploading the firmware, it can cause problems for us. So if our firmware matches the data that we need, then we just upload it. Yeah.
All right, so these are our Python files. So we use Python and both C to upload our firmware. So FW Protect is the firmware protect file. Basically, it outputs that secret build output text, which gives you the key. And then giving the key, that key gives it to the firmware.bin file and the bootloader file. For FW Update, they also get the key, and then they'll encrypt the firmware with the key. So like Shalok said, it will be the kind of gibberish. You won't be able to understand it. And then it will sign the firmware using the key, either using AES or HMAC.
Yeah, so we use symmetric encryption because it only requires a single key, and it like simplifies key distribution. Because in asymmetric encryption, you have a public key and a private key, and the public key is used to encrypt, and the private key is used to decrypt. And it's the other way around for authentication. But symmetric encryption allows us both encryption, both authentication, and encryption.
Yeah. So basically, we use hashing, signing, and versioning, which we kind of explained. Hashing, it just takes data and it gives us like a little string. And if that string matches the data when we send it over, then we know that the data is like complete. It hasn't been modified. Signing, we explained that earlier. And versioning, we need to make sure that the version is never lower because we don't want people to go to a lower version. So we include the versioning in our encryption to make sure that the version is equal to or higher.
So we decided to try to protect our TIVA's memory by using ASLR, which is address space memory location randomization, because we didn't want intruders to be able to just see, find where things are located and use that to overflow and spill our secrets to themselves. So what address space ASLR does is when an invader steps directly into our bootloader and tries to load it, everything should rearrange based on a random entropy value based on the tick, and then it creates more padding based on the tick. And then that helps a lot of things.
So one of our strengths is our program is very, very, very fast to upload. Since we use symmetric encryption instead of asymmetric encryption, we're very fast to upload. One of our weaknesses, though, is that we accidentally reused our IVs. This was not planned. We didn't realize that our IVs were being reused. Because one of the key things with nonce is nonce means use once, and we had our nonce hard coded. This was due to the lack of time to complete our project and to thoroughly see through everything. One of the opportunities is Riley using ASLR, which is an industry standard. It's seen through various things like operating systems like Linux and Windows, and one of the threats is resetting. We're trying to protect against threats. One of the threats was resetting the TIVA through uploads, like uploading firmwares, and performing known plain text attacks.
So attack plays, I'll just go through this really quickly because we're running out of time. There was a rollback flag, which was uploading a previous version. So many teams stored their version to verify at a different time. So what we were able to do was we were able to reset the TIVA at while we were uploading, and that would cause the version to be saved incorrectly, which could allow us to get the rollback flag. Intellectual property, if we used for example, the repeated nonce thing that we explained, that caused a big vulnerability, and many teams did that accidentally, which allowed people to get their IP flags or read out, decrypt the firmware without knowing the secret key, which is obviously a very big problem. The memory flags, some teams read it out from a location in memory directly and printed it out. So we were able to modify exactly which location that was and print out the flag that way. So for example, in the 2024 firmware example, by changing the size of the firmware, we could print out a piece of memory basically anywhere we wanted, which is very, very powerful. Yeah, and that's it. So thank you, everybody. We hope you enjoyed our explanation and maybe learned something.
All right, thank you very much, all. Very quickly, could you tell us what the most vulnerable part of your design ended up being?
Hard-coded nonces. Because we had the hard-coded nonces, people could just roll back the firmware to version 1 very easily.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we're moving on to the next group, sorry. All right, so our next team from the Design Challenge Attack project is Creative Blocks, and they're going to kick it off with their presentation.
So, as Sophia told you, we are Team Creative Blocks. We have the 4 of us. We have DJ, Rose, Daniel, and me, Lilith. And so, design project is the three-phase project, which I'm sure you guys have already heard about design and implementation, and where we attack, where we secure our bootloader.
Okay, now going a bit more into our implementation of the bootloader. So we combined AES GCM and ED25519. AES GCM is an encryption scheme which specifically allows for a confidentiality and integrity because there's an authentication tag that gets generated along with the encrypted data, which makes sure that none of the encrypted data has been modified. We also use ED25519 as a signature to ensure that each packet has been signed by the correct firmware to make sure that no one can change the packets and ensures that we are the ones that are sending the packets and not any attackers. And by combining these two methods, we ensure that our implementation is both confidential and satisfies confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. So some challenges we faced were the extremely low-level programming languages, such as C and assembly, since we are more used to like C++ and Python, but these are very low-level and allow for more interesting vulnerabilities, as well as the niche cryptographic libraries that we used, which have harder to find examples in documentation, and finally, the prioritization of which flags and teams to attack.
So our team actually ended up going unhacked in the attack phase, and I think that one of the large reasons behind that was while other teams were like reusing nonces, we didn't ever end up running into that because we only used one nonce in our entire firmware, while many other groups split into many smaller packets and encrypted each of those individually. We encrypted as one large chunk of data and then loaded that all in, and after we authenticated with a signature on each packet and metadata on each packet to ensure that it is correct. After we have loaded all of those packets in and we've ensured that they are all correct, that is when we decrypt them. And so we only ever end up using one nonce, so we can never end up falling into issues with reusing that nonce. We also, for every single packet, we have the version number of the firmware and that packet's index, which is also part of the signature. And this does mean that our bootloader is less efficient than other people's because we're sending more data, but it ended up being more secure.
Okay, so this is the attack phase. So for us, the attack phase in comparison to our implementation was actually a bigger challenge for us. But here were some of the attacks that some strategies that we used to capture other people's flags. So first, we used a hardware reset on the TIVA. And this could exploit a vulnerability where if you have something running and it interrupts unexpectedly, it can do some strange things to the TIVA, and we took advantage of that in order to get a flag. We also used XOR to reverse encryption, and this allowed us to get the key, which is actually very useful for finding flags, as multiple flags usually can be received if you are able to get the key. So once we got the key, we could forge signatures and do our own encryption, and that kind of helped us get more flags. We also wrote Python scripts, like exploit scripts, that could help us simulate communication with a TIVA and kind of eventually brute force it, and that also kind of helped us got some flags from other teams. There's also a website that we use called Microcorruption that the instructors told us that it's basically a long list of challenges. And if you solve these challenges, you can get 100 points each. And these challenges involve using assembly, taking advantage of buffer overflows and stuff like that. Yeah, thank you for listening.
All right, great work, y'all. So your design went unhacked. Clearly, you worked well as a team. How did you approach that? How did you work so well together and get that done?
I think that just planning and communication was really key. Delegation of tasks and making sure that everyone was always working on something. That way that we could all work together. No one was doubling up, and we could move with as much haste as possible.
Beautifully said. All right. Our next team is Team Nom Nom, attributed to one of the TAs from this course.
Hello, we are Team Nom Nom. I'm Sabrina Garcia.
I'm Adam Kidani.
I'm Ben Barreto.
I'm Zizi Zhang.
And I'm Seiji Ting. And we're Team Nom Nom. All right, let's get started.
First, we have our development roadmap where we have our priorities and our list.
So this is the feature overview for our design. So the first feature that we have is AES CTR. And basically what that does, it's imagine you had a secret recipe, and in that secret recipe, you protected that using a lockbox. And basically what this does is it ensures that only people who know the combination to that lockbox can access it, and people who don't, it would take too long to figure out that combination. SHA-3MAC is basically verifying that the frame. It'll make more sense when we have the diagram, but basically it's just like authorizing it, and the digital signature does the same thing, but instead of being a private key, it's public key.
And here's our most important feature. You just skipped over a slide. This is our most important feature, which is disabling the use of JTAG, which is basically debugging so people can't debug our things. And here's our generic flowchart where we're flashing the bootloader and updating the firmware.
This is our BO build. Basically, we start with bootloader.source, and it generates 3 keys, AES, RSA, and MAC. The AES, private RSA, and then MAC get set into secret.txt to be stored. Meanwhile, the obscured AES and the public RSA get sent into bootloader's bin to be compiled.
All right, I don't know if I'm even in frame. So I said this earlier in my earlier in one of the other presentations, but you only really learn about embedded security when it fails. This is the script that makes sure our system does not fail. So let's focus on this part. Can you click? Let's focus on. Let's focus on just this part. It'll chop up basically our firmware into 1024-byte frames and encrypt that using AES CTR encryption. It'll then be signed using the RSA private key. And finally, a MAC will be generated to make sure that our metadata is not tampered with during production. So at the end of this encryption cycle, our firmware will basically look like this with a data version number that can't be tampered with because of the MAC secret, as well as an RSA signature to make sure the firmware is not tampered with.
And this is an overview of bootloader.c. So essentially, this is what is being loaded onto the microcontroller, and essentially undoing all of the encryption that we did in the Python script. It verifies the MAC and the RSA public key. It decrypts with AES-CTR, and then finally it verifies that all the firmware is related to each other with a version number. And here's an overview of our attack phase.
So the first attack that we did was a memory leak, and basically what that is, it's you're reading the current memory that you're on, actually the old memory that the device was loaded onto, and this is really important because if an attacker were to do this, they could read old passwords and etc., and that's very bad. The second attack that we did, this is more for like extra points, but they're called buffer overflows, and we did those on microcorruption. That's basically where you flood a certain part of the system with data, and it will change the return address, and then we have an intellectual property. You want to explain?
So I just want to touch a little bit more on AES-GCM. This is an encrypted firmware from one of the teams, and as you can see, it's a bunch of garbage, little unreadable, not very helpful. And this is the version 3, and this is also essentially more garbage. Not much we can glean here. However, this team actually reused their nonce, which means the key stream is the same. So combining these two firmwares together by XORing them, we get this. This has a lot of patterns in it, and we can see that we're starting to get a flag. but this is still version 1 and version 3 combined. So we actually have to cancel this out with a raw version 3 firmware that we had from an earlier challenge. And then we get this. And finally, here's the flag.
This is our team reflection slides. So week 3 is the first week that we started as a group. We had a lack of synergy as team members were not communicating or informing each other of their tasks. We also had code confusion, which due to lack of communication, we weren't really sure what we were doing and people were overwriting each other's codes. Our solution to this was to sit down and discuss our issues together as a team, and then also make a Trello board, which is just a to-do list on what each team member has to complete. This is our week 4, which is this current week. And for this week, we had another coding flaw, which was when we discovered that our code was susceptible to rollback attacks. And then we also had another coding discovery where we found out that Wolf SSL doesn't allow for a GCM tag to be parallelized. Our solution to this was pretty easy. We just had to re-implement the protect.py script to AES CTR and redesign the craft of our program's protocol. And additionally, we also had to add 2-byte integers to our firmware. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Also, I just want to say one last thing. We were the most successful, this whole class, the most successful embedded security class, and we couldn't have done it. Yeah. All of us made it to attack phase. All of us got 1 or 2 flags, and we really just want to thank all of our instructors, Ted, Nam, Brandon, Max. Thank you, everybody, and Sophia, Kyle, everybody. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Team Nam Nam. You clearly learned a lot from this design work. What else did you take away from the course itself? One big thing.
I think I didn't know anything about embedded security before this course, but even just in the first week, you learn that like there's this eternal like cat and mouse game going on where like there are people building systems like ATM machines and credit card readers and thermostats, and you never really think about it until something breaks and you realize, oh, like when you slide your card through a card reader, that's vulnerable to certain attacks that can reveal your credit card info. So just learning about this whole new world, this of people trying to secure systems and attackers trying to break into them, I thought that was a pretty neat thing. Just sort of broadened my perspective. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, and great work to your entire team. All right, next presenting, we have Team Work in Progress.
So, hi guys, we're Team Work in Progress, and this is our project.
All right, so the main things we were protecting against in our project were people being able to read our unencrypted content from our firmware, which means that they could take our intellectual property and steal it. We also didn't want them to be able to get our encryption keys because then they could unencrypt our firmware and then they would also get our intellectual property. Finally, we didn't want them to be able to install bad versions of firmware because that could lead to people hacking our things or making it easier for people to hack our stuff. And side channel attacks are just another way of perhaps getting our encryption key or breaking our stuff. Wait, fuck, that's mine again. The way we encrypted it, which is basically just encoding our files, is through Cha-Cha Poly 1305. Cha-Cha Poly 1305 is both an encryption and an authentication method. So the Cha-Cha part encrypts our firmware with a same key that's used to encrypt and decrypt, which means that no one can get our encryption key. But it also has an integrity part, which is basically the stuff comes from the person you want it to come from, and it wasn't changed to have something that's wrong in the information.
All right, so here's an overview of our entire update process. So we start here with bootloader build, where we compile the bootloader C code into a bootloader bin that we can then flash onto the Chiva. At this stage, we also generate our encryption key for Cha-Cha 20 Poly 1305, which we used in the firmware protection stage, where we take our original unencrypted firmware, add metadata, which is the version, message, and firmware link to it. We encrypt it, generate a non-sender tag so that we can later verify authenticity and also decrypt the message. And then we send it to firmware update, which then sends the protected firmware to the bootloader over UART or serial, which is the Tiva. The bootloader reads in the metadata, does the Cha-Cha 20 Poly 1305 decryption and authentication. We check our metadata version and length, and then we read in firmware, decrypt and authenticate it, and we make sure that the version of the firmware matches the metadata, and finally we install it. All right.
So some challenges that we ran into during our project. So Wolf SSL is a library that we're using to implement our encryption algorithm, and its documentation is kind of bad. So we had some difficulty trying to implement that in our design. And some other things that we ran into was that figuring out the whole design process, how we're going to split the work equally, some formatting, and how to even get started. And another thing that we had trouble with was researching how to disable the debug interface without breaking the microcontroller permanently, and then just some other little bugs that we eventually figured out.
So while we did spend a lot of time on our design, there were some security vulnerabilities. And firstly, our encryption key for SHA-SHA-20, Poly 1 of 305 was stored in the plain text, meaning if an adversary was able to somehow read from memory, they would simply just get access to the key right there. And we also did not have any defenses against side channel attacks, which includes gathering data through power analysis or the electromagnetic radiation. And if we had more time to do our design, we would improve our security by adding another signing algorithm called ED25519, which is more for authenticity. And we would also split the secret key into parts in the plain memory. So if they were able to read it, it would be harder for them to piece it together. And we also want to prevent crashes during resetting, but this is a problem every team faced. And from this project, we learned that some methods of collaborating are more efficient than others. For example, we tried a tool called Code Together, but it was largely inefficient. And we also learned how to delegate work equally, as in we had to each work on different files as to avoid conflicts and also maximize our efficiency. We also had to plan out our design thoroughly, and this led us to creating a minimum viable product before actually implementing more complicated features in our design. And this was definitely a very important step in our learning process. And we also found out the hard way, I guess, that you had to have a working prototype at every time to back up your progress in case you accidentally broke something in your newest update, and to not overlook the small, easy components. Like the smallest things like version checking ended up being the most important to implement in the end. And then our advice, or also what we learned, is to sleep 8 hours and read the Stack Overflow threads.
And now a quick overview of one of our attacks, the rollback attack. So we noticed in a lot of teams' code, they had this thing where they would check if the version was equal to FFFF, which also happens to be the default version that all Tivas come with. It would be assumed that there was no version loaded, and the version would be set to 1. And we were able to notice that a lot of teams are trusting this version number before we had even sent the firmware or any sort of authentication data along. So we could trick the bootloader into thinking that FFFF was installed, get it to reset to version 1, and then we could downgrade the firmware that was installed on the device.
And then for our last attack, this was most likely our most crazy attack. But so basically, one team reused their nonce, which we were able to exploit because they used AES GCM. So what happened was that we XOR'd version 1 version 3 because version 3 does not have the flag, but version 1 does. So we were able to XOR the two files together. And in the end, we found the difference, and it ended up being inside the binary of the XOR, and we were able to read that and get our flag. Thanks.
Wonderful work. Teamwork in progress. So you mentioned one of the things you learned was to better delegate tasks for a coding project or anything like that. How exactly did you approach that?
So initially, we tried to use GitHub branches, which allows you to each work on different versions of the same project. However, we found this to be a bit cumbersome, and it was not as great for collaboration. So we decided upon having each member work on different files of the program. For example, I would work on the firmware or the bootloader building function, whereas Harry would work on the bootloader C. And we had 4 files, so this would split evenly amongst all of us. And once we finished them all, we just kind of cross-checked each other. Anyone else want to add?
Great answer. Thank you so much. All right, our next team is Team Thumbs Up.
Hello everyone, this is Team Thumbs Up of MSEC 2025, and this is our design project. So what are the objectives? Our goal is to accept a new firmware from only a trusted source. So in this case, that would be us throughout this challenge. Not only that, we want to keep whatever intellectual property we have safe away from attackers. So we want to protect that. And finally, we want to prevent malicious or invalid firmware from being loaded onto our bootloader. And yeah. So the first step of our process is encryption, and that starts with hashing. What we did was create a irreversible fixed length string of the data, so that and the goal of this is to protect integrity through our bootloader. And what that means is that we make sure that our thing hasn't been tampered with.
So for encryption methods, we use the AES and RSA encryption methods. AES is a symmetric algorithm, which means the same key is used for encryption and decryption. And then RSA is an asymmetric algorithm, which means a public key, which is a private key, which is secured, is used to encrypt the data. And then the public key, which can be accessed by anyone, is used to decrypt. And then after that, we used signing, which ensures authenticity.
So one of the main questions about implementing this bootloader is how do we protect it? How do we make sure that the bootloader is only receiving data that it knows is from the correct source? So the answer to that is a signature. How we form a signature is we use hashing, as Arthur talked about, to turn our firmware into one irreversible string. Now we can sign this with RSA, with an RSA encryption, and we finally have our signature. And then we can append this to a whole protected firmware package, and we have this entire blob to send over. By the way, our firmware is also encrypted with AES, which is the advanced encryption standard, to make sure that our intellectual property is confidential, it's private. So it'll just look like a jumbled up string of characters that really is indiscernible from anything else. So when we pass this over to the bootloader can decrypt our firmware and get actually legible and executable data. Now, it also needs to verify authenticity. And we'll do that by taking our signature and a protected firmware on our bootloader. Now, the bootloader will once again hash this protected firmware to get a hash, and then decrypt the signature to get its own hash. And then we can compare these two hashes to make sure that they're equal. And that's how we prove authenticity.
All right, so now I'm just going to talk really quickly about how we're going to run and update our firmware. So, of course, as Raul started with, we have a lot of security measures that we use to make sure that the firmware we're putting onto the hardware is secure. So first of all, when a firmware, like a new firmware is loaded, it doesn't basically get run immediately. Instead, it gets put in a specific section of the memory, and it has to undergo a series of checks as per the graph until it can finally arrive in this section of the memory where it can finally run, it's a program. Additionally, firmware is always stored encrypted in order to preserve confidentiality, and we always recheck the signature on each boot up for integrity and authentication. And finally, we always decrypt with keys stored in our EEPROM, which is basically volatile memory that doesn't change from, when it shuts off and starts up again.
Hi. So now we moved into the attack phase. Most of the teams had really secure designs, so we started focusing on a more insecure design from a previous year, which used XOR as their encryption method. XOR is really easy to decrypt because you just XOR again. So we knew their encrypted firmware, and we also knew their unencrypted firmware. We knew parts of their unencrypted firmware. So if we XOR those two together, we were able to find the key. The difficult part was finding where it lined up, which we were able to do by just scanning through the entire firmware. Once we got the key, we were able to get most of the other flags from that team. Some other attacks we were able to perform included partial updates, where we just sent the header and metadata, which included the size and version. This allowed us to perform rollback attacks or change the size to something smaller than the actual size, which would allow us to read from memory and allow us to get the memory read flag. Another team that Team Whip talked about was the nonce reuse, which we just got like 20 minutes ago. And we were able to get their IP flag.
So after our attack phase for reflection, we actually found out that we had a major mistake, which is that we did not check the versioning before booting the firmware, which allowed other teams to be able to load in previous or older versions of firmware. And then in general, we learned lots about stack, memory management,
binary, assembly, and C coding language, as well as how the encryption algorithms work and how embedded systems are secured. And thank you for watching our presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Could each one of you just quickly say one word? Which phase did you prefer, design or attack?
Design.
Design.
Attack.
Design.
Design.
All right, thank you. Guess we've got a lot of CS people coming in here. Thank you, guys. All right, our last team is Team Fly. And here's their presentation.
Hello, can you let me know when I can start? Okay. Hello, this is Team 当我飞奔向你, translated to when I fly towards you, often shorter to fly. Fly isn't really a very good representative of our name because we are much more indomitable than a fly. So yeah. Let's meet the team. I'm Xuan. I'm Michael. And together we are Fly. We will be going over these 4 contents in our project. So we'll first talk about our overview, our project overview. Sorry. Stop. We'll first talk about our project overview, and then we'll go into the cryptographic design. We'll talk about micro-corruption and attacks, and finally, what we did well and what we can improve.
Okay, so the premise of the design challenge is basically we were given a car with outdated firmware that we needed to update. So using this algorithm called firmware protect, right? We had to update it and push it to the bootloader to the TIVA, which is this little microcontroller right here. So this diagram here happens in the factory, right? So it isn't as prone to vulnerabilities. However, in the wild, you go to the next slide. Oh, next slide. Next slide. Is that next? Okay. So, however, in the wild, it is much prone to vulnerabilities. Specifically, when you look down here, right, from firmware update to the bootloader, this is where most vulnerabilities will happen, which we need to look out for hackers or attackers either intercepting our key or implementing malicious firmware onto our system.
So the encryption software we used was AES GCM 128. Essentially, it's a 128-bit encryption software that both encrypts and tags whatever you send in. It takes a 128-bit key, that's why it's 128, and it makes a 128-bit tag and takes a 128-bit message. So it cuts up into 128 bits the message wherever you're sending, and it's also symmetric, so the secret key is on both sides of this receiving. So that corruption, this is a little side thing we did for bonus points. Wasn't required, but a couple of highlights is that we completed the challenge with only 0.4 or 0.004% completion rate, and this isn't just our group. This isn't globally throughout the world. We analyzed over 2.6 thousand lines of assembly code, and we completed 16 different challenges in the span of a single week. We learned a couple stuff about assembly. That's the code language that this uses, and how to exploit it, such as buffer overflow, redirect and return addresses, overriding code, and exploiting printf methods, as well as exploiting the heap.
Okay, so now I will dive into kind of the encryption or the cryptographic methods that we used in our project. So first, encryption. Our encryption is basically we take our firmware, we split it into 1,024-bit chunks using the key and nonces that are generated by our protection host Python software. We can use that to use AES GCM to encrypt our firmware and output it as ciphertext and tags. The ciphertext is what's actually the encrypted data, and the tags we're using to authenticate it. In the decryption steps, this is basically encryption, but in reverse order. So we take everything from unused base. So this is the address and flash memory that we put our ciphertext in. We take them into 1,024-bit chunks. We use AES GCM again to decrypt them all into plain text. This plain text goes to plain text space, which is the temporary storage space to put basically all of our plain text. And after authentication, we can then flash it to FW base, which is our final destination. So as you can see here, we take the tags that we generated from before, we verify them with each of the chunks that we encrypted, and after everything is authenticated, we flash from PT base to FW base, and that is basically our entire encryption-decryption design. So packet design, I won't go too much into this. This is just how we are sending the data over. So essentially, we're sending it in frames. We have the frame size in front, followed by the 256 byte data chunk. And this is kind of our entire kind of firmware protection package. So this is the encrypted firmware. This is the message, basically like the update message. These are the tags used for authentication, and the metadata is just the version and the size. And now I'll be talking about kind of the second part of our design challenge, which is attacks. So for attacks, we needed to basically exploit code implementation. And I want to clarify on this: we're not actually breaking AES GCM. No one in this room will be able to break AES GCM, I predict. But we were really actually exploiting the code implementation, how we're actually implementing this protocol in our code. And that mainly consists of, one, bypassing authentication, and two, 4G authentication. So as you can see, authentication is a very, very important step in the process. And as shown on the kind of the list of flags that we got, the rollback flag was a very important flag, and it was one of the most easily exploitable. So the rollback flag consists of kind of downgrading to a previous version where there might be vulnerabilities that has been already patched. So as you can see here, we have version 2, and then through some like methods or some exploits, we can find a way to downgrade it to version 1, which will earn us the flag. And this was kind of a major part of like everyone's design, but a major oversight of everyone's design, and we were able to capitalize off of this in our attack.
Disabling debugger is like honestly one of the most important things we have to do for the system, because basically the debugger we're talking about is GDB, which is basically the GNU debugger, which is very powerful and you can use to basically get a lot of information and a lot of the flags you were talking about earlier. So one of the biggest things is it can basically read the value of memory addresses, which kind of like defeats the point of trying to protect it, because they can like just see what we're trying to hide. So this is basically, essentially all this does is it just flips 2 bits in a register, which prevents you from enabling the debugger. This is the idea. Now I'm just talking about some like reflection, just some after the attack phase. So we did make it to the attack phase. Our system was successful. We managed to get a few flags, and yeah, that went well. And we have some things we're going to try to improve in the future when just designing our own systems. Lack of signatures. We need to properly authenticate like basically everything, because if you can fake or like forge a signature or anything like that, that's just really bad. So we just need to stop people from doing that. We had limited time to test our design, which is arguably one of them, even really extremely important when you're making anything, to actually fix a lot of issues. And our final issue is we failed to erase like certain things we would flash, which isn't like by itself a terrible thing, but combined with other issues in your system, this can be exploited and used terribly. Yeah.
All right, great work. So of all of the attacks you did, which one do you feel like was the most like innovative, or which one was the most interesting to you?
I can talk about so the question was which flag or which attack was like the most innovative attack, and I did talk a lot about the rollback flag, so that's what I'm going to talk about. The rollback flag, it's like almost hidden in plain sight. So the essence of most of our rollback flags is that we're using kind of the metadata to kind of change the pre-existing version to a higher version, and then that higher version is actually like the max version gets defaulted to version 1, and then using that we can do rollback. And this like everyone understands this, but at the same time they think that they're defending against it by doing like protections like encrypting the metadata, doing signatures on it. But I think what most teams didn't realize was that when you're doing encryption on metadata, when you're doing signatures, especially when you're doing signatures, attackers can do those very same signatures themselves if they don't need a key. So if you don't need a key at all, you can do these signatures yourself, and basically it will trick the program into thinking that this is authenticated, but when in reality you're feeding it metadata that attackers have made themselves. And this was like kind of one of the most innovative parts of attack that we did.
All right, thank you. Wonderfully explained. And that concludes the embedded security portion of this event. Thank you.
Hello, this is Syracuse's AUVC Autonomous Underwater Vehicle Challenge. And what? And we came from Syracuse with a few other teams to do this challenge. I'm Cohen Furkey. I went to Nottingham and I'm going to Syracuse next year.
My name is Joey Bagalwa. I also graduated from Nottingham and I'll be going to Vanderbilt.
I'm Kalen Mathis, and I'm going into my junior year.
Hi, I'm Abigail Mannion, and I'm going in as a freshman at Syracuse University.
Hi, I'm Bashalawat, and I go to Nottingham High School.
Yeah, so part of the Autonomous Underwater Vehicle Challenge was to be able to have our sub be able to track and detect another sub underwater. And so with that goal in mind, and we had the idea to directly track another sub instead of using another idea, which is lane detection, which kind of sweep searches the pool until it finds another sub. With our model, we have this simulation that creates boxes around enemy subs. As you can see here, this box is created around what our model predicts is another sub, and once it creates that box around that sub, it starts tracking it. So basically with our model, we have three states. We have the first state, which is our searching state. With our searching state, our sub does a 360 turn, where basically it looks around the pool to see if it's looking or sees another sub. Once it is 75% confident that it is looking at another sub, it goes into the second state. The second state is advancing. Advancing the sub is confident that it's looking at another sub and it starts making its way towards that sub. Once our sub is close to that enemy sub, it flashes its lights to detect that it is close enough, and basically that is the whole process of how our sub is able to detect and track another sub. Basically, what's on the screen is our simulation. We made this using Majoku, a physics engine that like reflects real-world properties, and also using Unity to kind of make it look nice. This is the simulation in motion. This is basically what our sub will be doing underwater, kind of one-to-one replica. And this is a feature of kind of Majoku. You kind of see if you move the sub, the model in the simulation also moves a bit. It just like shows how it's like one-to-one and like very accurate representation. Yeah. And so, should we start the presentation? Yeah, so we're gonna start the presentation now. Yeah. There's also other parts of this simulation. Maybe go to the first slide. Probably start with this introduction. Underwater challenge. This is us again. Oh. Yeah, so kind of restating, the goal is to be able to build and design a sub that is able to track another sub underwater. In pursuing this goal, we kind of broke down the sub to understand like what is going on inside the sub and how it kind of works. And then we built a simulation to replicate like real-world properties and basically use the simulation to be able to track another sub.
So this is our sub. It's a blue ROV2 from Blue Robotics. Up on the top, we have the computer suite. This is where all of our computers are, like the Raspberry Pi, navigator board, and a lot of the other circuiting, along with our camera up in the front. Below that, we have the battery in the battery storage compartment. On top, we have two in the front blue flotation devices that helps keep our sub buoyant, along with two in the back that assists with buoyancy. We have 6 motors on the sub, 4 underneath at angles that will help us turn, move forward, and with all of our 2-axis movement. The 2 on top help us with movement up and down, with our pitch and yaw along with that. Next slide. Who's next?
So why would you use an AUV? AUVs are really cool because they're used in a number of different ways. For instance, in search and rescue, they can go over places where it's typically too dangerous for divers. So if an object gets lost or a person, you can send an AUV into like a cave or an underwater area to explore if it's safe for a diver to go in, or map out the route, which is really cool. It's also used for infrastructure and inspection. So like when you have those big oil rigs out in the ocean, they're connected by cables to the ocean floor. And you can send an AUV out there to inspect the cables and how secure they are. They're also used in bridges in like big city centers like Boston, which is really cool. And my favorite part is they're used in research. So they're able to study marine animals, monitor water temperatures, especially since there is a lot of water temperatures changing due to climate change. So they're able to monitor that. And they're able to collect data all throughout those systems and waters. So it's really cool.
So this is the logic of the submarine and how it communicates with the computer where we are running the code, and then it goes to the Raspberry Pi, which is the main computer in the sub. So it takes the info from the depth sensors and camera and more, and then it goes through the Navigator and Raspberry Pi, and it goes to the computer, and then that input goes to the state machine, which decides what happens, what the output is, and what happens to the sub. So it'll go in and it decides. He kind of went over this already, but if there's seen of if a bounding box is seen, then it'll move to the next stage. And then once the bounding box gets large enough percent to the screen, then it'll stop after it's advancing, and it'll get it. But so the data goes through all of them, and it'll keep going through and more until finally the April tag is detected and the flashlight is when the light is flashed.
So now we're just going to be talking about the testing stages. This is where we would test the submarine to make sure that it has precise accuracy. The first time we went to a pool, we had to check if the submarine could submerge underwater without getting any water in. If it does, we would just take it out and fix any errors that we have. After that, we did the non-autonomous stage where we had a remote controller. This way we could check the speed and the depth that the submarine could go to. This way we could check also how the submarine could move forward, backward, side to side. What? What happened?
So again, with our simulation is a mix of physics engine, Majoku. It's just a powerful engine that's able to like replicate real-world properties, and also a mix of Unity, which kind of just allows the user interface to be like very clean and allows like the average person to be able to use it. And yeah, with all these physics projects, it's very useful. Like it's like allows us to kind of predict how the sub is gonna be replicated like in the real world and like the water, and just like it's very helpful in the testing and later stages of our project. Who's doing this?
So with a PDI controller, this would help us just have the basic PDI concept, and we could check how accurate the submarine could be stabled. This also, we are able to adjust the depth in the litter control system and it provides performance. We also use a navigator board to test it out for us. In this way, we don't have to use a sub a lot, and it would just have us precise. Also, we use to fine-tune the PDI parameter to concept for the buoyance effect. All right, we're done. Go.
State machine is the different states the code or submarine can be in, which is searching, centering, advancing, and circling, and then finally it'll flash the light at this other sub. I think we've already said all this, so we can just move on.
So to go a little more in depth about our strategy that Joey talked about earlier, so through YOLO 8NS, we trained an object detection model. We were able to do this through RoboFlow. So we imported about 1,000 images and annotated them by creating a bounding box around the sub, which is demonstrated in the photo here. And this allows our sub to be trained to recognize the other sub in the water and track it. So we're able to do this at 15 ms per frame, which is really cool. And through this whole model, we're able to track the sub, detect its April tag, and then flash our lights before the other sub does, which is really cool.
Colin? Colin?
So this YOLO N8 is the model we used for the machine learning. It's what we put all the data we collected using, and so we put it in this model, and then it was able to learn based on the images so that it could detect in real time the boxes. And then this, the Visualizer Live Tuner, is the state machine for the, this is the state machine for the Visualizer Live Tuner, and it'll go through this, and this is for the simulation. So it's made, it's for, it'll go through the different stages for each step of like connecting the sub to the simulation and to the real world all at once.
So this page shows what our programs are. On the top there we have Blue ROV. They are the producers of this submarine that we were able to use. The Raspberry, it's for the Raspberry Pi, the computer that we had used in it. OpenCV is one of the other numerous programs that we've used in the process. Unity is what we use for our graphics and training of the robot, along with Minjoku, which helped with our physics engines. We have YOLO, which was described on the last page, which helped with our training of the robot.
Throughout this project, we had some issues. We had like some wear and tear with some of the products that we had. Some of them being like some wire snapping and like early stages of like maintenance and like where to put the sub, and kind of like water leaking into the sub because we didn't have the necessary tools to test like the seal on the sub. But this program is like very helpful. We learned a lot of things like how to navigate online spaces and how to use websites like GitHub, RoboFlow, YOLO, Majoku, and all these other great online resources that anyone could use to do lots of other projects. And so in conclusion, it's just like a very fun, just kind of project that we worked on this summer, and I'm very glad that we did it. So, the end. We're done. We're done.
Hello, we're Orangeworks Team 2 for the UAS SAR.
I'm Benjamin, and I go to Fayetteville Manlius High School.
I'm Quincy, and I'm a senior at Fayetteville Manlius High School. I'm Sonia, and I'm going to be a junior at Manlius Pebble Hill.
I'm Kirsten, and I'm going to be a junior at Fayetteville Manlius High School.
Okay, so to start off, we're talking about how synthetic aperture radar works. And before we do that, we're going to give some background, some fundamentals about what exactly is radar. So radar itself is an acronym that stands for radio detection and ranging. And how it works is radar is pretty simple. It sends out radio waves, which are forms of electromagnetic pulses, and into the environment. And then once the radio waves hit the objects, the radar system is designed to listen for those reflections when they bounce back. So now talking about the problem with traditional radar, which is resolution. When we're talking about resolution, we're talking about how clearly you can distinguish between two nearby objects. So can you see two distinct objects, or is it blurred into one blob? Traditional radar's resolution depends on two things. The first is antenna size. So larger antennas have a narrower beam that you can transmit, which gives better resolution. And then the second is wavelength. And shorter wavelengths give better resolution, which is why things like X-rays can see very smaller details rather than longer wavelengths. Synthetic aperture radar. The thing about synthetic aperture radar that's very genius is that it can synthesize a very large antenna artificially by using a smaller physical antenna moving on a platform. Because a traditional aperture radar is very large. If you want to get a good scan, it needs to be very big, and you can't have a large antenna mounted on a moving object like the drone. So it collects data over a long path, taking pulses, acting as if it was a single giant antenna, creating the synthetic aperture radar. Okay, so how it does this is that it goes through, and as you can see on our drone, we have these motion detectors. A lot of radars will use either a GPS or an IMU. Ours, we have an external computer that is tracking the location of these location trackers along with the data from our actual radar. So it compiles that data with the feedback from our actual radar to be able to combine the corresponding data from the different pulses. So where does this go to? A lot of the applications of synthetic aperture radar come from the way that the different systems are engineered. So as you can see, our radar system has these two antennas, both of which transmit and receive. We do not have separate transmitting and receiving antennas. So this gets into applications that use interferometric radar, or INSAR. And so this can be great for things like glacier and forest deformations and things like that. Because not only can synthetic aperture radar, because of the way that it's created, see through things like smoke, volcanic ash, clouds, and things like that, but the use of multiple antennas like this can be used to look under forest canopies and through the structure of buildings and things like that. So not only do we get this much clearer image from what we would see with an optical radar or other optical systems, we would get this higher resolution that is available to be used in multiple different terrains and weather conditions. And by using things like interferometry and a bigger baseline that separates the antennas more, we can combine this to look at the differences in the smallest of changes. Synthetic aperture radar can see centimeter differences that optical lenses just can't see to that level of detail. And so this can be really great, especially for the recovery of glaciers melting and other natural disasters. We're able to, from the formation of their back projections, and especially when we use systems like IMUs, be able to get practically real-time feedback that can even be used for danger alerting. Okay.
So I'd like to put back projection, for people that don't know it, is back projection is an imaging method that is used so we can paint a scene, and it can from multiple pulses that are sent out by the radar. So we can see a radar platform, which is our drone, for example, right here. And first we have to do the data collection process, of course. So for our example of what we did, we went from horizontally, like, just pretend this is a 3D plane. This is kind of further back. We were kind of going horizontally right here, and then we were just going here to here. And then when we do that, pulses are sent out, and then we receive them back, and then the ones that are closer will give us a higher decibels, and then the ones that are further will give us lower decibels. And then this will be used for our second part of the back projection. And then so this is how we construct our image pixel by pixel. So depending on our motion capture data that we also had, we can find where the radar was when the pulse was sent, how long the echo pulse took to return throughout the whole entire scene, and then we can accurately offset the data that we received, and then we can sum every pixel in the picture. So based on the amplitude that we get after offsetting all of our information, we can get a picture that kind of looks like this, which was an MIT example, and ours spelled out the characters BW for our example. And these are extremely versatile and accurate, even with complex angles. So we can apply back projection to many different things, such as ground radar, where we can go over a piece of land and we can find where pipes are and other obstructions in the ground. We can use it for astronomy to find 3D planes of planets, exoplanets, stars, and galaxies. And then third, which is most important for modern society today, is CT scans. And CT scans can allow doctors to accurately diagnose diseases in the human body.
And next is the components of the radar system. So to begin with is the antenna. The antenna is made up of multiple smaller dipole antenna. These capture different wavelengths most efficiently through the process known as resonance. Through this, we can capture a wide range of wavelengths and get an effective image. In the transmitter and receiver, we produce the actual wavelengths that we're going to be using and transmitting from the actual radar. And this also modulates the frequency between the pulses, as described earlier, how both of them are pulsing. And this allows us to have apt time to scan to look for the information that we're receiving after transmitting the pulses. The receiver then boosts the weak return signal because naturally after reflecting the waves that are transmitted, they will be quite weak. And this allows us to get the data that we're looking for. In the pipe processing, simply what we're doing is we're taking the data from that, we're compounding it by looking at it over a amount of time and from different directions through range bins, as shown in the range time intensity diagram I have shown there. And then we run a algorithm over that for both the movement data that we're doing to track the radar and the actual data that we're receiving back in order to create the image that we're looking for. In our process of creating this, we look to fly our drone. So as Karsten described, we are flying it over and collecting that data. We're then taking that, running the algorithms on them, and then reviewing. So we did this often in order to look to see what sort of noise we have and how we can fix that by fine-tuning values in order to get the result that we're looking for. One of our test SAR images that we had before coming over here, we were able to use the manual setup option, and through fine-tuning the values there to what we were looking for, we were able to much more clearly get rid of the noise and see the image that we were looking for. For beyond the baseline, there were a couple of key improvements that we saw making clear differences throughout our process. To begin with, very early on, we found that our early back projection algorithm was extremely slow and wasn't going to back project in the time that we were given. Because of that, we found a way in order to streamline it and make it more efficient. And then this allowed for us to actually increase the run speed by 60 times, which is very important due to the time-strained nature of the computing phase. We also, when we were first getting images back, found that the noise was completely covering it. So using, as we said, the manual processing before, and what we had as PLT IM show, we were able to remove the less powerful signals that we were getting back from the receiver. And through this and a bit of fine-tuning over time, we were able to find exactly what strength of signal we were looking for in order to create our final images. Here you can clearly see that change from the highly noisy image to our final image with far less noise, a clearer background, and more pronounced cans. But there's still some problems with the top of the B. Improvements for the future, I'd like to see an improved radar hardware so that we can more stably fly the drone. This would make far more reliable test data so that we can use more of it. Also, more filtering algorithms would be useful because in the previous diagrams, even with the reduced noise, we still had some troubles lining it up. Thank you for your attention.
SAR project. So I'm Alex Ross, and I'm an incoming freshman at Clarkson University.
Hi, I'm Dennis Gersoy. I'm an incoming freshman at the University of Pennsylvania, where I'll be studying electrical engineering.
I'm Rayhan Rinzan, and I'm an incoming freshman at Cornell University.
And I'm Alessandro Terranoni. I'm an incoming mechanical engineering student at Syracuse University.
I'm Caden Wiley. I'm an incoming computer engineering student at Stony Brook University.
So first we'll be talking about what SAR is. So SAR, how it works, is an active radar system. It emits microwave signals and measures the echoes that bounce back. Usually SAR is implemented on moving platforms, and it captures multiple radar returns from the same target from different positions. And as a result of this, there's Doppler shift and phase info that we have to take account of. This comes in the reflected signals. So how SAR works continued, we need to do signal processing to reconstruct image of the area we're surveying. Specifically, we need to look at the raw data from multiple pulses processed using algorithms to transform the 1D radar returns into high-resolution 2D images. So we need to do these processing techniques because the short pulses that we get back require very high peak power, which can damage the hardware. And SAR solves this with a technique called pulse compression. So there are two different kinds of pulse compression methods, which is one being the chirp pulse and pulse compression itself. We specifically looked at pulse compression, where the long low power is received and then processed, and a mathematical model correlation is performed, which compares the echo to a copy of the transmitted signal.
So now we're going to talk about what SAR is used for. SAR has a lot of important real-world applications, and these can range from things such as military purposes to also environmental monitoring. Some of the applications include military base monitoring, monitoring deforestation, forest fires, and also the melting of ice caps and oil spills. So one of the big advantages of SAR is the fact that it can see through things like smoke and fog, as well as some foliage and soil, which gives it a lot of power in some of these scenarios. As you can see here, we have some diagrams. You can see in the bottom left, we have an oil spill there that they were monitoring using a SAR image to detect its spread. And then on the bottom right, we can see the monitoring of some destruction from some wildfires at a national park to get a damage assessment and sort of figure out how to restore the damage. And so basically these are some ways that SAR can be really useful in the real world, and the industry is growing and we're still finding more ways to apply this technology. So this is more about the applications of SAR. I've already talked about how it can operate through fog, smoke, and clouds. It can also operate without sunlight, unlike optical sensors, and also it can go through foliage and soil.
So for our propulsion system, the motors we used specifically for the propellers, they were the Q-went out brushless motors, and those provided enough torque and power to lift even the drone with the radar system. And for the propellers themselves, we used carbon fiber to keep them rigid, and so they'd have strength even during crashes. In fact, we only broke one during all of our many attempts at flying.
Okay, so for the radar system itself, we use the Pulson 440 ultra-wideband radar module. So basically it outputs like short nanosecond pulses for higher resolution like range measurements. And then we use the WA5 VJB planar antennas. So those provide like wideband directional frequency, the ultra wideband frequency range, and then together they create our radar, and then we send all that data taken from the radar, and we send it to our Raspberry Pi 3, and then it collects the digitized analog output, and then we send that to our laptops, and then we run our back projection code and others. And then here's the data collection and development process.
Yep, so data collection, during this we need to go from range time to raw data. So the UAS transmits radar pulses and receives echoes, and using the UAS X, Y, and Z coordinates are recorded for each pulse, and we are able to give, this gives us the data for the location of the UAS and our raw radar data. So to develop the image through back projection, we need to calculate the range from radar to pixel, find corresponding scan data, and integrate scan data to pixels value in the final output image. And this will basically sum the radar returns from different UAS locations onto each ground pixel.
So here's a little bit on back projection more further. So how back projection forms a SAR image. As the radar platform moves, it collects pulse returns from multiple positions along the flight path, and each radar pulse records the time it takes for the echoes to return, giving it a set of range profiles. So back projection works by projecting each echo back into the space and based on where it could have been reflected from. And for each image pixel, it computes the distance for every radar position and then adds that all up to get the matching return signals. And this process reconstructs a high-resolution SAR image by integrating all of the data at all of the different positions. So here's a little bit more in depth. So for each image pixel, we loop over every radar pulse. So those are all the positions along the flight path. And then we compute the one-way range, which is the distance from the radar to the pixel. And then we find the closest range bin in the radar return. This corresponds to that distance. And then we integrate that value into the pixel's intensity. So a little bit more about the algorithm steps. So we first initialize the SAR image with our SAR image complex. And then for each pixel, we loop over all of the radar positions. And then we compute the range to pixel. And you can see down there, our range to pixel calculates the distance from the radar to a specific pixel. That would be the square root of x minus xk squared plus y minus yk squared plus z minus zk squared. And we find the closest range bin using our closest range bin index, and we find the absolute value of the range to pixel minus the range bins. And then we accumulate for the echo using the SAR image complex, and then we display the final image. So here are the results of the final image. So this was from yesterday's final competition. You can see it spells out BW, and we can see all of the individual cans on the second one, so all of them are labeled, and then we have the special object, which is labeled S there.
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we improved beyond the baseline. So as a first kind of output from our back projection, we kind of see what's on the left here. This is from a scale of 20 to 120 on the right here. But there is a lot of extra noise and a lot of unneeded stuff that we can get rid of. So what I did here was during yesterday's data processing portion, I gave a threshold during the back projection process to limit what we were seeing. So as you can see, from a lower boundary of 20, we went to a lower boundary of 100. So we could see a little bit of a clear image, and you can see that BW starting to really pop out.
So we had a lot of both successes and roadblocks or challenges in our process. Some of our successes included just the drone construction, as well as implementing code, delegating roles to our team members, and collaborating as a team and working together. Some of our roadblocks included faulty antennas and poor data collection, as well as some rough back projection results and rough images, which we eventually were able to work through. Some other drawbacks that we faced included faulty connection with the drone to the controller, and also getting the drone in the air with the added weight of the radar. But eventually we were able to work through a lot of these roadblocks to get a decent image.
So going forward, we made some really great progress as a team, And I think to make some changes, we definitely try to consider the weight of the drone. The weight of the drone was somewhat of a limiting factor that kind of impacted our ability to fly. So we'd like to try and find ways to lower the weight and make a better drone flying capability. Going forward, I think we'd also try maybe different algorithmic techniques in our back projection. For example, one of the things that we implemented was changing the color threshold, but there's a lot of different things that can be done there. For example, resolution of the pixels in that image can be changed. So things like that could be improved in the future. And that's all we have.